So Martin's going to talk to us today. He's the metadata manager at the University of Liverpool, with an evolving role specialising in e-resource management, cataloguing of print and e-resources, interpretation of cataloguing rules, and large-scale data transfer and amendment. And he's been a member of a number of groups and boards, and is currently co-editor of the Catalogue and Index, the Journal for the Metadata Discovery Group, of which he's also a committee member, and he is the funnel coordinator for the UK NACO funnel, which is the topic of this talk. Off you go, Martin.
Okay, can you just see my presentation now? Is that what you can see? Or
Yep.
yeah, excellent. Okay, okay. Hi everyone. As Will just said, I'm Martin Kelleher, and I'm going to talk to you today about the launch of the UK NACO funnel, which I believe is going to be the start of something absolutely wonderful, or is the start of something absolutely wonderful. So I'm hoping you'll celebrate with me exactly how great it is, and also I'll kind of go through everything, explain what's happened to get us to the point that we're at now. First of all, though, I'm going to go straight back to the roots of the program. If you followed development of the funnel project, then you'll know some of this. But for those who haven't, I'm going to go through the general process of it anyway. The roots of it. There was an earlier proposal from Deborah Lee in 2012, published in Cataloguing and Indexing. And that was there was very different circumstances at the time. It didn't really follow through with the establishment of a funnel. I think there were some particular circumstantial reasons for that. One of which was that it would have been much more complicated proposal at the time as a result of the basis of the training and the nature and way it was delivered at the time. But also around that time would have been when a lot of metadata departments, particularly in academic libraries, would have been reducing. There was a tendency around that time for the workforce to reduce in metadata sections. So for those reasons, I suspect that was why it didn't particularly take off around 2012 or subsequently. That reduction of metadata staff in academic libraries did impact ourselves at the University of Liverpool, and I discovered that if I went for NACO entries, Library Congress Authority entries, it was possible to automate that using the system that we had, Sierra, which hadn't been aware of up to that point. So I started investigating switching to NACO authorities and authority control, and we changed all our entries to NACO entries in 2019. Now, we want to be able to contribute to NACO to manage our author index in the way we had previously, rather than just relying on records coming in and having them managed without us being able to manage our collection with it. We want to be able to contribute to have that kind of the same level of control we previously had, or something like that. But to contribute to NACO, you can't just sign up and do it. You've got to undertake some training, and you've also got to establish some kind of access, either direct access on an institutional level, or funnel access as a member of a funnel node. Now, direct access requires a substantial quota to be fulfilled, so funnel access seems the way to go for us. So we talked to OCLC, who did a lot of the management of funnels and do the management of the funnels, about setting up access in the UK and what options there were. And it turned out there were no active funnels in the UK. So then subsequently, the representative from OCLC, Paul Shackleton, took that to the CILIP Catalogue and Indexing Group Committee and discussed it in a meeting late in 2019. I had also recently joined the committee, so I was there to discuss it as well. It was raised again 2020 by Jane Daniels, who's the chair of the committee, and I volunteered to investigate the situation with an eye to creating a funnel. I didn't realise, and I don't think Paul Shackleton did either, that actually this had already been being considered by Wealth, and they'd already been investigating establishing a NACO funnel, but I kind of decided to take it on because I'd been raising it as a query myself and was keen to get one established. So having made that decision, I did training in NACO cataloging in September 2020, and went on uh, to undertake some research and start promoting the establishment of a funnel over 2020 and 2021. In terms of research, started sounding out the British Library in terms of what they were doing and whether they'd be interested in being involved in the funnel. And they came back saying, they had direct access as did all the deposit libraries, so that they didn't really need a funnel, and they were busy establishing a fast funnel, fast subject headings, which are kind of a variant form of Library Congress subject headings, which they're moving to. I also contacted Debbie Lee, who wrote that earlier paper, who gave me some more ideas about what would be involved, and kind of the plans that she was making beyond what was in the paper. And I talked to Frank Koper, who's the Netherlands Funnel coordinator, who was very encouraging and gave me some good pointers, and yeah, and represented it as being a very feasible idea to establish a funnel, and it gave me an idea of what being a funnel coordinator would involve. And of course, I also discussed it with Paul Frank at Library Congress, who's the main NACO coordinator for the Library Congress, and for the Name Authority file in general. So kind of established a bit of a loose business plan, and that was very easy to establish. I found, compared to the situation that Debbie had when she was proposing it initially, it was a much easier situation to establish a funnel and to manage the funnel financially and logistically, because it moved online. This was part of the impact of COVID, of course, 2020. So the course when I'd undertaken it was an online course, and I'll go into exactly how much of a dramatic improvement that was for managing the training shortly. I wrote an article in Catalan Indexing, June 2021, encouraging people to join the funnel and to kind of back the funnel. That didn't really get much take up, but it was meant as a kind of prefix to um, an online webinar I was planning on giving, and I was going to give that in separately, but I decided to give it at a kind of call for membership at the Metadata Discovery Group mini conference in December 2021. And throughout that time, I was discussing the establishment of funnel with other members of the Metadata Discovery Group committee, and Jane Daniels, who was no longer chair of the MDG committee, but was still very interested. So I carried on communicating with a number of different people over establishing funnel. So at the conference last year, the mini conference, I felt I had a very easy pitch in a way. The pitch was mostly based on both the feasibility and the benefits. In terms of feasibility, certainly compared to the previous arrangements, the costs of training were gone, and the logistics were so much better. It's obviously so much easier to organise an online training course, rather than one where you're all kind of like training in a physical classroom situation. Previously, you'd have to pay for someone to come over from the US. You'd probably want to establish training for a number of different institutions, which meant people would have to have accommodation in the area of training. It'd be quite an intense, long period of training over a week. So that'd be a lot of time committed for a number of different people, and that had to be coordinated. So it's much more complex kind of arrangement than doing it online, where actually people just stay where they are. The trainer, Paul Frank, stays in America, and we stay in our relevant places, and people throughout the world can all be trained at the same time, so much more conveniently. So the logistics a lot better, no cost in terms of managing any kind of physical arrangements, but also the way that the course was managed, the time commitments became reduced and were much more flexible. You're no longer required to undertake the entire course in one go. You could always do whatever was relevant for you, and then possibly undertake more subsequently. You but also it was flexible in terms of how long it would take you to undertake the course. You didn't have to cram it into a week. You could extend it over a longer period of time, and inevitably that certainly happened to me, and for the other funnel members when they joined, it was true for them as well. In terms of funnel commitments, the ongoing production requirements for funnels had always been relatively modest compared to direct contribution on an institutional level. But it was made clear when I did the training that actually that had now been reduced to nil. So you didn't actually have any commitment as a funnel member, which is of course one less thing to worry about and one more positive. And the ongoing costs were, I felt, fairly reasonable. You just needed to pay the cost of the interface that you were using to subscribe to, which would typically be OCLC's connection. And it looked that it may have been becoming more reasonable because there was a plan underway at the time to Discovery organising with OCLC or approaching OCLC to kind of create a national deal through JISC. So there was the hope that that would make the cost more reasonable for various members and for anybody, and for potential members of libraries of all kinds of shapes and sizes. That was certainly the hope. I think that's the only thing that didn't follow through in the end. But on top of that, the whole thing was a very user-friendly course. I certainly found that, and I felt it easy to convey that as my feelings about the course in general. So I felt I had a very good pitch for in terms of feasibility. Certainly better pitch than could have been established when the course would have been undertaken physically. In terms of the benefits of having funnel access and being a NACO contributor, I also felt there's quite a lot of areas where you can where there are significant gains for your library. You are empowered to input into a global dataset, and Library Congress's name authority file is one of certainly the most important one for the English speaking world of libraries. It also feeds into other data sets as well. So to be able to feed into that, and of course it's the main data set that we use to manage our authorities and the main source of most of our authorities in libraries. So to be empowered to input into that, it gives you the power to manage, to contribute to the management of authorities overall for certainly most of the English speaking library community. And of course, it empowers you to maintain your local control through that, because rather than otherwise, if you don't contribute to NACO, if you're doing any kind of like headings or doing any kind of authority control while using NACO headings, then you are having to work around whatever's being done independently of you. So if you're having to split between different authors, you might create a heading which would then conflict with any entries that come in, which are likely to be Library Congress. And so if you're a member of NACO, you would you'd be empowered to be able to ensure that any changes that are undertaken centrally would include and involve and work around any changes you'd be making. So it's a much more efficient way to manage your authorities. You're also setting the foundations for the future in establishing your institution as a part of this larger data set, and those kind of benefits should establish a national kind of benefit. And the more institutions sign up, the more there's a kind of like that wider kind of picture to kind of providing more relevant entries and authorities for the UK as a whole. So it generates a stronger national benefits as well, and a stronger metadata infrastructure for the UK, because of course we're mostly using Library Congress's authority control. The stronger a presence we have there, the stronger we benefit. The stronger a presence we have, and the stronger benefits there are for us on a national level as well. And of course, we can also use that on a local level to promote and identify locally relevant persons and places. We've all got press collections and such like, and where we've got materials that simply are not covered sufficiently or to any great extent. And also in terms of people employed by our institution, you've got the power to kind of promote them by adding in details into records, and whatever scale you wish to do that, which is all welcome. The more detail you add in for persons in name authority file, the better. And of course, there's potential benefits for a ref for those of us in academic libraries in terms of establishing, the more unique identifiers you're establishing for persons relevant to your institution, the better it is. And that's certainly the way it's understood, and I think it's the way it is. So there's all kinds of benefits locally, nationally. Um, Also, cataloging ethics has been something of greater importance and a greater focus in recent years. And being able to input into the name authority file gives you the power to implement those cataloging ethics to the way that names are managed for the benefit of your institution and overall for the cataloging community of the UK and the world, really, I suppose, to feed into that and to manage entries responsibly. You're empowered to do that and to have that national impact and see that kind of influence grow in the name authority file and be have those interests pursued. So I think I had a reasonably easy pitch. There were lots of benefits. It was so much more feasible than it had previously been. So I kind of asked for people to volunteer to join, put down the challenge, and the challenge was accepted. There were a number of early adopters very quickly, a number of major institutions: University of Leeds, University of Aberystwyth, Sheffield Hallam University, and also we had someone else from our institution joined that signed up as well. And on top of that, first wave, all three, Leeds, Aberystwyth, and Sheffield all signed up to undertake training in the January wave, as did the cataloger from Special Collections Liverpool. But also we had Cardiff indicating that they also wanted to join, but weren't ready for the first wave, but they were planning on joining for the next wave in September. So straight away had people who I'm glad to say were interested and keen to take up the challenge and take the opportunity that the funnel provides. So that was all fantastic. Um, it was suggested, I think, by Amy from Aberystwyth that we should probably organise some kind of structure to facilitate communication. So I kind of established a JISC email list, which was very easy to create and manage. List UK funnel. That was a good way for funnel members to just communicate with each other. And establish we had a few initial meetings, established through Teams. And in those meetings, we kind of learnt a bit more about each other and where we're all coming from. It's all, always good to have a few catalogues together. It was a good experience, and it was nice to see that everyone had similar interests, with slightly different emphasis. But overall, things like special collections came up as something that people want to develop, unsurprisingly. Other local collections, and there's inevitably institutional interest as well, representing our institutions. So, I mean, that was the same kind of things that we're expecting to feature as reasons for joining, and it was same for ourselves at Liverpool. So um, it was we all had, like, we're all coming from the same kind of place, really, with a little variation. So those three institutions went through and undertook the training in February 2022, as it was. I say I called it the January training, but actually it started in February, and it usually has a very vague kind of loose uh, dating to when the training actually starts, as I understand it. I attended the initial session, and then kind of left everybody to it. The training format was, it was a new site that was being used, but it was still essentially the same kind of format that I'd been using. You see a picture of it there. It's most of the training was undertaken using recorded lectures by Paul Frank himself, which you could watch when you wanted to. There's a general structure, which was kind of like a live structure over a couple of weeks, where there'd be like progress and kind of like exercises that you could undertake would be discussed in those live sessions. But I'm glad to say that you weren't necessarily expected or required to fulfill that kind of training within that very tight schedule. And as it happened for me, the various trainees from the various trainees from the various institutions during the funnel all found the same kind of thing, where that they extended way beyond the initial period of training. But that was all fine. The promise of being able to do that, I felt, was fulfilled. The training was extended without difficulty, and again, Paul was quite happy for us to do that, and and it was all facilitated um, for the various trainees. So that was all good. Um, as the training was being undertaken, there were a few other things that came up. Obviously, I had to set the funnel itself had already been set up by Paul Frank in 2021. And I think he did that in order to see whether he could just set it up without going through OCLC, and he just set it up himself. I'm not sure if that was the first time he'd done it. But anyway, he did that in 2021. But the various accounts had to be set up for the various new members of the funnel. We had quite a confused meeting with OCLC over setup. I think there was a bit of a culture difference between ourselves and the OCLC rep, or possibly a US kind of approach, which is we were all quite happy having having institutional logins. We didn't require an awful lot of security because there was not much of an expectation that many people would be using connection beyond being able to contribute to NACO. I get the impression that in the US, in particular, maybe more people use connection for standard cataloging and such like. But for most of us, it was more just for NACO. So being able to have different logins for different persons wasn't as much of an issue. But ultimately, having established that, it was very simple format. So everyone was set up with accounts and then taking the training. But ultimately, in terms of fulfilling the training swiftly, workload and priorities and other projects did take precedence, and that was also certainly true for us at Liverpool as well. We're switching to Alma at the moment, so that implementation of Alma very much dominated my time and took time away from the funnel. So there's kind of existing workload issues. But again, just to emphasize, because of the flexibility of the online training, that was all accommodated, and everyone was fine to carry on with the training. I think that was all a very a positive. I think it's a very positive approach on behalf of Library Congress to do that. So that was all good. There was a question of reviewers, however. When I'd undertaken the training, the reviewer was Paul Frank himself, the trainer, and we all were required just to create two name authorities, a personal name and a corporate name, and that was it. The way we went. But with this new wave, there was an expectation that there would be more reviewers, because I suspect it was because there was such a large group then had undertaken the training when I undertook the training. So that instead of being reviewed by Paul Frank, you would be reviewed by the expectation was the funnel coordinator. Now I still didn't have that much experience at that time, so I kind of reneged on that kind of responsibility, which Paul was fine about. And so we had external reviewers. I think most or all from the Library Congress. But so that was a change. But from when I'd taken the training, but also the reviewing protocol has slightly changed. Instead of just being required to create two headings of two different kinds, there was a looser kind of protocol and practice, which was basically that the training would continue, or the assessment by a reviewer would continue until both reviewer and reviewee were happy. So it was more open-ended than it had previously been. So that was just like a little change in the way that the course was managed. There were a few questions and issues, as always, and so the big issue that came up, a possible solution. is beginning to be investigated. The remit of the funnel has come up as an issue for discussion. What it's for. That partly came about regarding National Library of Wales in particular, but then that raised questions again in terms of the British Library. I'll go into that shortly. The big issue that we had, however, was relating to the JISC OCLC UK deal, which we were hoping would make the use of the contribution to NACO cheaper and more accessible, but actually that deal fell through. But there was an attendant price rise attached to that for a number of institutions who already had OCLC access and who were already undertaking funnel training. And because of that price rise, some of the institutions then cancelled their subscriptions, and so access was lost. So that presents a problem because the main tool for submitting entries to the name authority file is OCLC's connection. Had already brooked the question of whether OCLC membership was necessary and had been told it wasn't necessarily the workarounds. Obviously went back to Paul Frank again to discuss what those workarounds were, and it turned out that the workaround was for other members of the funnel to contribute headings on behalf of those who didn't have connection access, which wasn't as positive a workaround as I was hoping for, since that does generate extra workload for others. So we found that, I think, fairly discouraging. However, there are a number of solutions that could be considered, and the most obvious one is to use the other tool for contributing, which is Sky River, innovative Sky River. I had been already investigating that and had signed up for it for use at Liverpool, but basically we had Sky River as part of our deal with another innovative product, which was Sierra, our main LMS. But since we were switching to Alma, we'd lost access, so I hadn't been investigating it anymore. But now it's being investigated again, and Helen from Sheffield is kind of leading on in that investigation. So that's one possible solution. Hopefully, we'll sort that out. And of course, it is good to have a diversity of interface rather than a particular monopoly. So so it looks like hopefully we should be able to resolve that issue, but that's in the initial stages of resolution at the moment. Just to go back to the deposit library situation, this came up because through their Wealth connection as members of Wealth Consortium, Cardiff University had been trained by the National Library of Wales. That was made available to them by the NLW, and so they undertook their training with them, and that was I think they were expecting that to be something that would then require some kind of addition to by the online training, but actually that was found to be sufficient, and Paul Frank was fine with that. So but in addition to that, it was clear the National Library of Wales would provide some kind of authority support, and we're willing to do that, and for Welsh library community. So that was something that then raised the question of, well, is there that going to be the situation for the other main deposit libraries? Haven't approached National Library of Scotland about that because we haven't got any Scottish libraries yet. But so then we kind of went back to the British Library to see if there was anything like that. We're using BDS for cataloguing support, creating catalogue records for us. So we talked to them about authority control, and they'd made clear that they had a direct line of name authority production to the British Library as part of their role of creating cataloguing in publication records. So kind of went back to the British Library just to get clarification about whether that was something that they might be providing as a general service, because there was kind of an idea that, well, if that is being supplied by other people, then maybe we should factor that into our priorities as a funnel. But that wasn't the case for the British Library. So there's a particular boon for Wales there. but sadly not necessarily for on a national basis, which kind of makes sense. So, but it was certainly something that we started to investigate. In terms of expansion and growth, now I had that initial wave, which was very good to see, but also um, after that initial wave of recruitment and training, Cardiff, as I mentioned, they did training as well. They were expected to undertake training in the September wave of training, but actually, as I mentioned, they were trained fully before that by the National Library of Wales. University of Leicester, however, they did sign up, and they did undertake training in September. So there was further growth between those two institutions. Um, Following on from that initial wave, so now we've grown to 6 institutions involved in the funnel. There was some interest from universities from Ireland, particularly early on, but there's been a couple of cases over the year, and also quite significantly, there was interest from the Mercy and Metadata group, and they were interested in the idea of having a sub funnel, a funnel to a funnel, which I'm not sure whether that's something that can be set up or could be set up, but it was certainly something that we kind of talked about a little, and so to have a whole kind of regional group interested, that does raise questions about how to continue to expand NACO access in the UK. Should we have funnels to funnels? Possibly more likely, we keep extending, the central UK funnel. But then there's a question of whether we should have more funnels. I mean, all of which are excellent options. So there is definitely, this is very much the start of what's of like greater development, I feel. And we've also had more individual institutions also applying, some of the quite significant ones. So these the people who signed up already, it looks like we're going to be joined in contributing to NACO by more, and it looks like it's going to continue uh, carrying on, which is all fantastic news. Fantastic news for me, and I think for UK cataloguing in general. So to the future, there's a few ideas of where we might continue to go, and there's a few positive signs in where we're already going. We've already started empowering people within our institutions to control their own personal information, which is something that's one of the ethical drives for doing this. That's happened at both University of Liverpool and Leeds, where we've had requests to amend entries, and of course we can do that not just on a local basis, but ensure we can do that for them on an international basis. So much more empowered to help those people represent themselves. And there's been we've kind of like sort of both set up kind of internal communications regarding that. We've been empowering institutions to improve. Well, something we're looking to the future to do, and certainly discussed, is empowering institutions to improve their representation for ref, and also just identified persons relating to themselves. That's something that still planning to go forward with. We've discussed also the possibility of generating a pool of authorities, to be made available to other members of the funnel, where they require creation or amendment. It's kind of like, and that require a bit more infrastructure, which will be to the good. We've already got like some infrastructure, so this would be something to build on that. And to build on that for, and that'd be a benefit to people who um, have authorities that need requiring, but also to potential trainees. If they haven't got a handy authority, that could be a good source of material to practice with. Um, and We're already kind of beginning to add to the catalogue of persons relating to local collections. So that kind of benefit for our local collections management and representation is already becoming a reality. Another thing that could potentially go into is expanding into SACO, to empower EDI developments in subject headings, which is very much something that I know lots of people are interested in. I've not undertaken that yet, but to be able to do that, certainly having a NACO funnel, it's easy to consider attaching a SACO funnel to practices there as well. So, and but also allow us to improve the representation of those kind of like more local terminologies as they apply on an international level. So I think we are only at the end of what's the beginning. So we've having this time last year having no one as a member of the funnel. Suddenly you've got like 6 institutions as a member of the funnel suddenly in training or trained. So it's blossomed quite well. I'm very happy with the way that that's progressed, and as I say, this is only the beginning. So with that, I'd just like to thank you all for listening. I hope that was interesting. I hope that was useful to you, and I hope that that's also encouraged you to consider joining the funnel yourselves. I'd also, in addition to thanking you for listening, I'd also like to thank very much the people who've joined me in the funnel for their interest and enthusiasm, and for kind of taking up that challenge, and for making the funnel what it is. And I'd like to say lots of members of the funnel are on this webinar today, so they'll be available to answer any questions as you ask them. So I guess we'll probably offer up questions for further clarification if any of them want to add to it, or answer them wholly. But yeah, so with that, I guess so thank you again, and offer up any questions about what I've just said.
Thanks, Martin. I'll just stop the recording and then we'll get to questions.
Thanks.